Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Mueez Aizaz will defend the academic thesis, Advanced Non-invasive Atherosclerotic Plaque Imaging Strategies, Harnessing the Power of MRI, PET-MRI, and Dual Energy CT. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Highly esteemed Prorector, Assessment Committee, supervisors, friends, family, here and online, thank you all for joining. In the next 15 minutes, I'll give a brief overview of the work that has been presented in this thesis, which is titled Advanced Non-invasive Atherosclerotic Plaque Imaging Strategies, Harnessing the Power of MRI, PET-MRI, and Dual Energy CT. Cardiovascular diseases are a group of disorders of the heart and blood vessels. Together, cardiovascular diseases are the #1 cause of death globally, amounting to up to 31% of all deaths. Heart attack and stroke are the main cause of fatality among cardiovascular diseases, and therefore are also the main focus of this thesis. The clogging of the arteries or hardening of the arteries, also known as atherosclerosis, is a condition where substances such as fat, calcium, and other materials build up inside the arterial walls. As you can see in the figure above, this buildup can increase over time and eventually even block the flow of blood through the artery. This buildup, also known as a plaque, can also rupture, and this rupture can block the flow of blood through the artery downstream as well. If this blockage happens in an artery feeding blood to the heart, it can lead to a heart attack, and if this happens in an artery feeding blood to the brain, it can lead to a stroke. Current medical guidelines use the degree of arterial narrowing to decide whether a patient will get only medication-based treatment or will they get a procedure to remove the plaque and restore blood flow. However, there are cases where there is no severe arterial narrowing before a heart attack or stroke event. Similarly, there are cases where there is high arterial narrowing and yet no heart attack or stroke. So this begs an important question. Is using the degree of arterial narrowing to base your treatment on enough, or should other features also be taken into account? Apart from the percentage or degree of arterial narrowing, studies have shown that the makeup of the plaque and the biological processes taking place inside the plaque also play a key role in how the plaque behaves. For example, the presence of large fatty deposits, inflammation, thin or ruptured fibrous protective layer, leakage of blood inside the plaque, as well as the presence of blood clots are all indicative of a plaque that is prone to rupture or a vulnerable plaque. Now we've established why the makeup of the plaque is important. Multiple imaging modalities exist that help us visualize the makeup of the plaque, and each comes with its own pros and cons. For example, CT. CT is fast. It provides us with anatomical information, and it uses radiation. MRI also provides us with anatomical information, and it excels at differentiating between soft tissues. PET, or positron emission tomography, provides us information about the biological processes taking place inside the body. And finally, PET-MRI, which we will discuss in detail a little later in the presentation. The contents of this thesis can be divided into two themes. In theme 1, we introduce novel techniques to improve the identification of vulnerable plaques using state-of-the-art imaging technologies. In theme 2, we focus on a key vulnerable plaque component, which is leakage of blood inside the plaque. For the sake of time, I'll skip chapter 5 in this presentation. Coming back to simultaneous PET-MRI, as the name suggests, simultaneous PET-MRI acquires both PET and MRI simultaneously. MRI provides us with anatomical information, in this case, the anatomy of the heart, and PET provides us information about the biological processes taking place, in this case, the uptake of glucose by the muscle of the heart. Because these images are acquired simultaneously, we can co-register them with ease, and then we get this one single image that provides us information about both the anatomy as well as the biological processes taking place. Apart from this, there are other advantages such as less radiation dose as compared to PET-CT, less scan time and more comfort for the patient as they have to go into the scanner once and they get both PET and MRI scans done, and that you can use motion correction information from MRI to correct for motion in PET data. And this is what we did in chapter 3. As you can imagine, imaging of the heart suffers from motion artifacts because heart is always in motion because of breathing as well as beating of the heart. Motion correction techniques are well established in MRI, and because we acquire both PET and MRI simultaneously, we can use these to correct for motion in PET data. One problem here is that often the MRI motion correction information is only available for a short duration as compared to the complete duration of the PET scan. We overcome this problem by using external sensors to extend this motion correction information for the complete duration of the PET scan. And using this, we were able to create respiratory motion-corrected PET datasets. In order to test the performance of our motion correction technique, we compared the respiratory motion correction dataset with the non-motion corrected datasets. We drew lines through the region of uptakes and plotted the values along the line on the plots above. As you can see, the respiratory motion correction dataset, shown here in red, shows narrower peaks with higher peak values. As we had used the complete PET dataset, this also allowed us to discard some of the PET data and also perform cardiac or motion correction of the heart, of the beating of the heart. So we also did that, and as you can see in the plot in green, this represents the dataset with both respiratory as well as cardiac motion correction, and it shows narrow peaks with the highest peak values. Techniques such as this increase the reliability of the PET data and give the doctors more confidence in deciding how the plaque would behave. We've talked about the advantages of PET-MRI, but there are also specific challenges. One such challenge is the presence of RF coils or radio frequency coils inside the PET-MRI field of view. Radio frequency coils are MR antennas. They pick up the MR signal, and which is required especially for high-resolution MR imaging, which we are interested in because we are interested in looking at very minute structures. But the presence of such a structure or radio frequency coil, as you see on the screen, can also be a source of PET photon attenuation, leading to errors in PET quantification. In order to overcome this, we designed a new specifically to be used inside a PET-MRI coil by changing some of the materials to less photon attenuating materials and moving the highly attenuating materials outside the region of interest, which in this case is the neck or the arteries that feed the blood to the brain. In order to test the performance of our new coil, we compared it with a conventional MR-only coil to be used in an MRI scanner. And we saw that with the new coil, there was minimal signal loss in the region of interest. as compared to the conventional coil, which showed substantially higher signal loss in the region of interest. We also wanted to see if the MR image quality was affected by the design changes that we made. So we also compared the MR image quality, and there was no significant difference between the MR image quality from the two coils. From this, we could deduce that the design changes we introduced not only significantly lowered the signal loss from PET images, but also did not affect the MR image quality. Different imaging modality, dual energy CT. So we all know CT scans. A conventional CT scan uses a single source of energy. Dual energy CT, as the name represents, uses two sources of energy. Different materials behave differently under different energies, and this makes dual energy CT very suitable for differentiating between different tissues. We wanted to see if we could differentiate between the tissues that make up a plaque using dual energy CT. Using MRI as reference, we drew or marked different tissues that we were interested in on dual energy CT data and created this cluster plot. What this showed was that there was a clear distinction between the different tissues that we were interested in. And using information from this cluster plot, we decided to automatically delineate some new dual energy CT data. For the sake of comparison, we also used literature-based single energy CT ranges to also differentiate the same tissues and see how well that performs. In the example above, you see the reference image, which is MRI. It is already delineated with some of the tissues we are interested in. The red region represents the parts of the vessel through which the blood flows. The green represents the outer vessel wall. Yellow is the region where there are large fatty deposits. Blue represents the leakage of blood inside the plaque. And finally, brown represents the calcification. As you can see on the single energy CT, it does not, or it fails to find the leakage of blood inside the plaque. In comparison, dual energy CT does find the leakage of blood inside the plaque, and the delineation of calcification is slightly better as well. From this study, we could deduce that dual energy CT performs better at delineating atherosclerotic plaque tissues as compared to single energy CT. Now moving on to a key feature of vulnerable plaques, which is leakage of blood inside the plaque. Leakage of blood inside the plaque is an independent predictor of stroke. As you can see in the plot above, the chances of stroke-free survival are much lower if there is leakage of blood present inside the plaque as compared to patients who did not have blood present inside the plaque. Considering the importance of this particular feature, we wanted to see if further predictive value could be derived from this particular feature. So we divided a group of patients into low and high leakage of blood volumes, as well as low and high signal intensity ratios. The signal intensity ratio means the signal intensity with which this leakage appears on MRI images. We followed these patients over 5 years to see if there was any difference among them in the stroke-free survival. At the end of 5 years, we saw that there was no difference between the patients with high or low volume of blood leakage. Neither was there any difference between patients with high or low signal intensity ratios after 5 years. From this, we could deduce that there is no need in the busy clinical environment to create or to calculate these cumbersome calculations of the volume and the signal intensity ratio, and simply finding the presence of IPH is enough to base your treatment decisions on. To conclude, the novel motion correction technique introduced significantly improved the image quality in the motion-corrected PET images. Techniques such as these improve the confidence of the doctors in predicting the behavior of the plaque. The flexible carotid RF coil, designed specifically to be used inside the PET-MRI scanner, reduce the PET signal loss while maintaining the MR image quality. We also deduced that the dual energy CT performs better at differentiating plaque components as compared to single energy CT. This means that if a patient who cannot lie in the MRI scanner because the scans are too long, then dual energy CT might be a better replacement as compared to single energy CT. And finally, we saw that there was no extra advantage in calculating the plaque volume, nor was there any extra advantage of calculating the signal intensity ratio of the blood leakage inside the plug, and simply finding their presence is enough to base your decisions on, treatment decisions on. Thank you all for listening, and I would like to hand the word back over to the prorector.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We now will start with the opposition, and the opposition will be opened by the chair of the assessment committee, Professor Schurgers, Professor of Biochemistry of Vascular Calcification at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Madam Prorector, dear candidate. First of all, I want to congratulate you with this beautiful work, a beautiful thesis, a colorful cover, but also the content. I think you have 7 papers published, 3 as a first author, and 3 more in the pipeline. This is a great achievement, which you probably did not alone, so I also want to congratulate your promotion team. And I thought, I'm a biochemist, what I'm doing here between all the radiologists and the medics. But I know your work quite familiar. I'm quite familiar with your work because you were in the consortium IntriCare. And do you know which number you are in the consortium that defends the PhD thesis?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. I imagine I would be somewhere around 13.
You're number 13. This is a bad number, an unlucky number. And maybe this is why the cover has this lucky horseshoe picture on it to protect you from this bad luck. But we're here today to have a little bit of an academic discussion and to get a little bit familiar with how you think. I have a few questions for you. You can only choose one. Pakistan or the Netherlands?
Pakistan.
Jhelum or Maastricht?
Maastricht.
Eindhoven or Maastricht?
Eindhoven.
Academia or industry?
That's a difficult question. Is there an in-between somewhere? No?
I have to choose.
Academia.
Academia. Tissue histology or PET-MRI?
PET-MRI.
Plaque volume or plaque composition?
Plaque composition.
Microcalcification or microbleedings?
Microbleedings.
Okay, so then we go ahead with the microbleedings, and I will not disturb you too much with microcalcification, although you have one of the paranymph that can support you. Can one of the paranymph read proposition number 6, please?
Non-invasive imaging techniques will play an increasingly important role in guiding personalized treatments for patients with atherosclerosis.
This is a great aim, personalized treatment, and I really like that. And also in your thesis, you write the development of simultaneous PET-MR imaging has opened new avenues for early diagnosis, improved risk stratification, and treatment evaluation of patients with atherosclerosis. Now, I'm not a radiologist, so can you please tell me what are the costs of PET-MR, and what is the resolution compared to a regular CT scan, which is fast, as you described in your presentation, and less costly?
Highly esteemed opponent, when you talk about costs, do you actually mean the economical costs, or do you
No, just the scan.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not exactly sure about the costs that are involved. I think when we were doing some of our research-based scans, then the costs went above 2,000 euros per scan per patient. But I don't know how it would be in a clinical environment with insurances involved.
Yeah, well, you work for industry now, you should know the cost. But let's say it's quite costly.
Yeah, for sure.
And you want to measure these microbleedings. Do you know the resolution of a microbleed? How big are these in an atherosclerotic plaque?
We are talking about somewhere between 200 microliters to 400 microliters, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm. And the resolution of a PET-MR, would that be able to pick it up?
So if you're talking about MR, it has slightly better resolution as compared to PET, where we can even go sub-millimeter resolution in MRI. In PET, we still have somewhere 2 to 4 millimeter resolution.
So actually that exceeds the micro scale of microbleedings. Now, If you look at these microbleedings, they come from mainly new formed vessels, small vessels in the atherosclerotic plaque. Do you know where they come from?
The requirement, because of the hypoxia that is created inside the plaque, there's a requirement for oxygen. And this causes closer by arteries to branch off and create these microvessels.
So they come from the vasa vasorum and they grow into the plaque.
Yeah.
Which means, actually, if they are there, we talk about advanced plaques. So the advanced plaques, they have these microbleedings.
Yeah.
So if you say we want to go to personal treatment and diagnosis, are we not far too late if we target the microbleedings, which represent, as we now discussed and agreed upon, the advanced atherosclerotic plaque?
I agree that these are advanced lesions by the time the intraplaque hemorrhage or the bleeding appears. But unfortunately, I think this is also one of the times that we can detect because the IPH appears quite clearly on the scan. Ideally, if you have developed methodologies such as being able to detect microcalcifications at a much earlier stage, because microcalcifications are there at much earlier stage, that would be useful. But currently, the studies show that with IPH, you can at least predict that there's a high chance of plaque vulnerability and rupture.
Yeah.
So yeah, based on this, the physician can base their treatment probably go for a more serious procedure, invasive procedure, and that could be, that could help with the treatment.
And do you think we are ready there to tell something about a personal treatment, or is it more on a group's level?
If we are talking about basing our treatments on the vulnerable plaque tissues, which is currently not the case in the clinics or in the actual treatment, but if we do consider it is, then we can have personalized treatment. So if we imagine a patient that does not have high arterial narrowing but does show the presence of intraplaque hemorrhage or the microbleedings, then there is a possibility that the treating physician decides to go for a more invasive procedure.
So coming back to these small vessels, so they grow into the plaque where there is hypoxia.
Yeah.
Do you also know the reason why they become leaky and why they cause bleedings?
So because these are neo-vessels or newly created vessels, and there is the biomechanical stresses from the flow of the blood and the presence of the stenosis, this combination makes these neo-vessels leak and cause the leakage of them.
Yeah.
There's also a possibility that there's leakage through the lumen itself. So if there's a thin or ruptured fibrous cap, there can be leakage through this way as well, through this route.
So it has nothing to do with the medication, because many of these patients are on anticoagulant therapy.
In my study, I did not really work with medication and its effects on microbleedings.
Okay, so I work on these microcalcifications, and I always say if we measure calcification in the clinic with non-invasive imaging, I always think that we are too late. We should target the molecular mechanisms that lead to this calcification, and that was also, I think, one of the aims in our consortium, IntriCare. Could you think of a few molecular mechanisms that you could target that precede bleedings in a plaque, and that maybe would help you targeting the plaque before bleedings occur?
As we discussed earlier, I think one of the main causes of the formation of these vessels is the hypoxia that's present. In PET imaging, there are tracers available that help to detect this hypoxia. So that could be one way to detect before these vessels are created or before IPH happens, that you already know it is a possibility that this will happen here. Similarly, there are MRI sequences that help you visualize the thin or ruptured fibrous cap. So if that's the route, that can also be visualized as well.
So there are many more targets that we can go for and to visualize. Last short comment. What do you think is first, microcalcification in the plaque or microbleedings?
Microcalcifications.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. With that, I'm happy with your answers, and I give the word back to Madam Pro-Rector.
Thank you, Professor Schurgers. The opposition will be continued by Professor Nicola, Professor of Nuclear Medicine at the Technical University of Munich in Germany, and Professor Nicola is online. Go ahead.
Also, congratulations. Very, very nice work. You covered a very large range of topics. And you picked, I think, one of the most complex tasks we can find in our field, basically motion in the heart, and even worse, motion of the coronaries. And I'm doing this myself for quite some time. And we all had great hopes for the PET-MR, but technically, as you know, the PET-MR didn't really work out that nicely. Before I get to a little bit more applied question, what is your personal take why the PET-MR actually didn't fly as high as especially the industry most likely thought so?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. I agree that it seems to have not picked up yet, and I think that's because it's lacking a key use. If you look at other modalities, they have quite well-defined uses, and actually they're quite useful in most uses, but justifying the costs of a PET-MRI still requires a specific use case. In my thesis, I try to show that the imaging of atherosclerosis is a good use case because with MRI, we get the soft tissue contrast, which is useful for differentiating between the plaque tissues. And with PET, we get information about inflammation, hypoxia, microcalcifications. So this could be, and this is why this thesis tries to suggest that yes, PET-MRI might be the most suitable modality.
You mentioned very early that basically the alignment between the PET-MR is really a kind of piece of cake, which a little bit contradicts my personal experience. I don't know how many examinations you were attending of cardiac patients with the PET-MR, or maybe you spent some time in the system as well. It's narrow and these scans are long. And basically having a sick patient in such an environment is, in my personal opinion, and would be my question how I see it, this is something where the CT simply has advantages because it has a wider bore and it's fast. Whereas in our setting, you have a tons of motion because simply the patient doesn't feel comfortable. You have found many correction mechanisms, as did we, basically for correcting the motion of the heart with MR, and basically to some extent relying on a periodic motion. But my personal feeling is that the involuntary motion in this thing, because the patient is not feeling well, is one of the driving elements why PET-MR has a really hard time unless they come up. You know, the diameter of PET-MR is 60 centimeter. From a plain MR perspective, this is way too narrow. So what were your personal experiences in such a setting with the patients?
I agree that the PET-MRI scans are quite long and are uncomfortable for patients. When I say that the registration of the two modalities is easy, I am comparing it with two not simultaneously acquired scans, because of course in that case the patient probably has to move to the other scanner, and then there is enough motion in the initial positioning of the patient that the registration becomes more difficult as compared to PET-MRI. But indeed the long scan times for patients, especially who are uncomfortable to lie in the scanner for a long period, do suffer. This does make it a modality that's not the preferred choice in the clinics as well. But there are MR sequences that are being developed, such as the multi-contrast sequences that require multiple contrasts in the same sequence that help greatly reduce the total scan time. So I believe there is still potential. It just has to go through the research procedure and become part of the clinical routine.
The last part of my question complex is basically about translation. I'm doing this now for quite some time, and every now and then it's kind of frustrating that the great work we did never really made it into a product. From all the different approaches you were basically looking at, what would you think, do you see, is there hope to get these things faster from basically a research environment to the industry? And B, from your experience, as you did quite a number of approaches, what would you think would be the one which is the best candidate to get into reality?
So if I understand your question correctly, you're asking which of the techniques that we've implemented would be the best to come or the quickest to come to the industry. I believe coils that are specifically designed, flexible coils that are specifically designed for PET-MRI, they're already part of the industry. They are already being developed. I imagine motion correction is the one that has the most potential or most requirement as well. Like you mentioned, these are really long scans. But I think this requires still more research. I believe, in my opinion, AI has to play a role in this. And with dual energy CT, which was the third technique that we implemented, it does work better than a single energy CT. But still, MRI and histology are the gold standard in this case. So there is photon counting CT that shows a lot of potential. That may be something that needs to be looked at. Unfortunately, I did not get the chance to do it. But yeah, if MRI is not possible, then based on this thesis, I would say dual energy CT usage could be something that also the industry can implement.
Did you have contact to the industry as part of your thesis to facilitate the transfer of these sequences or methods into relatively soon what I learned in my career, but soon in terms of basically translation to industry is 5 years. Everything which is faster is an illusion, simply based on the paperwork the industry has to do now. But did you already dive a little bit into this adventure with the industry to get into reality?
Unfortunately, I did not get the opportunity to do that. This is always really exciting to have the, you get something that you worked on actually working on the patients. But for me, I think the motion correction that I worked on still needs some work before it can become part of the industry.
Okay, congratulations again. I think this was the questions from my side. Very well answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nicola. The opposition will be continued by Professor Schulz, Professor of PET and MRI Physics at the Aachen University, also in Germany.
Yeah. Again, from my side, congratulations to this nice thesis. And I mean, as you probably know, I'm pretty much in technology of PET-MRI since almost more than 20 years. I'd like to start with a very basic question, and it's a little bit, let's say, on the border of the research you have done. You used local receive coils in order to boost the signal to noise in your MRI images. I'd like to discuss or get a little bit the idea of what exactly make the local receive coils improving the signal to noise ratio compared to the integrated body coil. I'd like to discuss that with you. Could you actually explain me where is the gain of local receive coils of an MRI is actually coming from?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and your question. Unfortunately, I did not get the very last part of your question, so could you please repeat that?
So you used in chapter 4 the local receive coils in order to boost the signal to noise ratio of the MRI, right? That's the main reason of using this local receive coils. I mean, this is actually introducing, let's say, a substantial problem because now you have to take care of the photon attenuation of these local receive coils. I mean, you could also do this with the integrated body coil, for example, yeah, but you decided for the local receive coil in order to improve the signal to noise ratio of the MRI. So where is this signal to noise ratio improvement of this local receive coil from the MRI coming from? I'm not talking about the PET, I'm just talking about the MRI, yeah?
I think thank you for your question again, and thank you for repeating. The close proximity of the RF coils to the region of interest, that is where, because then the signal is picked up better as compared to the built-in coils. This is where the improved signal to noise ratio is coming from with the flexible carotid coils that we use.
Well, this is actually part of the effect, yeah. So I mean, I'm with you actually with that the signal is being improved by this local locality of the coil. But actually, is there also another aspect of this local receive coil that makes the SNR of the MRI improving? So could you think of another aspect that is beneficial for this local receive coil? or if I may ask in a different way, where is the noise of your SNR coming from?
It's coming from the electronic noise and the distance that the signal has to travel, and the conversion from the RF signal to when the K space is being built. So I imagine because of the close proximity, this is improved.
Mm-hmm. The signal is improved by this close proximity. This is true. But I mean, actually, the source of the noise of the entire MRI measurement, what do you think the main source of the noise is? You said actually electronics, which is unfortunately just a part of that. Yeah.
And I think overall the surrounding area around. So if the tunnel in which the patient is lying is also, so the space there is also part of the noise that's affecting the images that are created.
Well, it's actually the Brownian motion, actually, it's a temperature, it's the patient itself which is producing the noise, yeah? And this is actually the benefit of this local receive coil, because the pickup of this noise area for the local receive coil is pretty much smaller, which is actually the boost of the signal to noise ratio. But I'd like to discuss with you, you moved the piece of the electronics a little bit in distance to the local receive coil, yeah? So what are the components within this local receive coil that contributes to the photon attenuation or scattering? Do you know what's inside the electronics?
I think because I no, unfortunately, I'm not exactly sure of what are the electronics that make up the coil itself. No.
Okay, so you proposed in a summary of chapter 4 to use markers for the local receive coil in order to localize the coil. Yeah. So how do these markers actually work? So what do they do? Could you explain that?
You mean the markers that can be used to create the attenuation maps for these coils?
Well, this is actually what I picked up from your thesis. You meant by using markers, yeah.
So exactly, one alternative way of, rather than developing a dedicated PET-MRI coil, would be to use an MRI-only coil, to scan it first in, let's say, a CT scanner. You put certain markers on it, which are guidelines of where certain positions of the coil are present. Then when you perform an PET-MRI scan with it, you can adjust the CT scan with the coil, because you have markers present to match the markers on the PET-MRI coil. This way you can create an attenuation map for the coil, and you can correct for the attenuation of the PET photons.
So if you would do this for the two different cases you have investigated, for the MRI coil only and for the more transparent PET-MRI local receive coil. So if you would do these type of corrections, as you just described with Atlas-based, so meaning CT map, would you actually see a difference in terms of quantification of these two different solutions?
So the idea behind the PET-MRI coil was that it does not require attenuation correction post-scan. But for the MRI-only coil, for sure, this is the method that is often used. So we do expect improvement or reduction in the PET signal, that is, or signal loss, while maintaining the MR image quality. Yeah, I would expect that, yes.
Okay, so, and instead of using markers to localize the receive coil, could you think of other methods that might allow us actually to localize the receive coils?
Cameras that are constantly visualizing. I think some groups have used those Kinect from, I think, Xboxes. They have a methodology where they're constantly looking at a certain structure, and then these can also be used to correct for the motion of these coils in later on to create the attenuation maps.
Are you aware of any other special MRI sequence that you can use for localizing the coils, maybe?
So I think there are MR sequences. I think the Dixon sequence is used to create attenuation maps for the human body. I think there are other sequences that also exist that help us visualize the coil, and that can also be then allotted attenuation based on the different materials, which can then be used as attenuation maps. That is correct.
Yeah, so the Dixon sequence does not allow us actually to see the local receive coil. Is there another sequence that allows to visualize the local receive coil?
Unfortunately, right now the name is eluding me, but I know it exists. I think it's also used for visualizing the bones, but I don't remember the name right now.
Right, so ultra-short echo acquisitions or zero acquisition times. Very good, actually. So maybe my closing question, actually, in the entire modification of the local receive coil.
Professor Schultz, can you keep it very short? Very short question and a short answer.
Very short question. So, so what was the most challenging part, actually, in this redesigning of the local receive coil? And then I will also close.
What was the part, sorry?
So what was the most challenging part of the modification of this local receive coil?
The moving out of the complete electronics, so you would expect that the increased distance that have been introduced would increase more noise. So all the electronics and the materials that was used for the pads that are around the patient necks were the biggest changes, and they were actually the biggest variables that we had to see if they work or not.
Thanks a lot for this nice discussion.
Thank you, Professor Schultz. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Verberne, Associate Professor at the Amsterdam University Medical Center.
Thank you. Congratulations with the work, not only to you, but also the whole team who made this happen. To cut things short, do you agree that PET-MRI is a technology very nice, but looking for a clinical indication? And not the other way around, there is a clinical indication that PET-MRI solves everything?
Hi, esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. I would agree that PET-MRI is looking for a clinical application. And I would also like to add that the visualization of atherosclerotic plaque could be that particular what we are looking for.
But do you need both? Do you need the PET and the MR, or is MR by itself or PET by itself not sufficient?
Yeah, if we are interested in really bringing it or making it part of the clinical workflow, then it would be nice to have as many of these vulnerable plaque tissues as part of the decision-making process. We've talked about IPH, but we've also talked about inflammation. We've talked about, or slightly touched upon, my calcification. So all of these, if possible, they should all be included, and that's only possible with a simultaneous PET-MRI.
Is it because you also discuss a dual energy CT, but there is a new kit on the block, the photon counting CT? And if you then combine with a PET, you can eliminate the MR? What do you think?
So with the dual energy CT study, the results look better than single energy CT, but as I mentioned, the reference standard still is MRI and histology if possible, but you're already too late by then. There is a new kit on the block, photon counting CT. I've only read about it, and the promises are really high. Unfortunately, I personally haven't had the chance to work with it. But I agree that the ability to count photons, bin them based on energies, increase spatial resolution, being able to... So that would be really interesting to see how that pans out. And of course, it has the advantages of CT of being fast and comfortable for the patient because shorter scan time. So because that would be very interesting.
Do you know how many PET-MRs there are, for example, in the Netherlands?
I believe the one in Maastricht was the first one. I think now there are 3 or 4.
Yeah. And if you compare the two PET-CT?
There are, I think, many in each hospital.
Yeah, many. That is at least I think each larger hospital has at least one. So there, I think you have an answer to the question. If you look for clinical applicability, I think a PET-CT would drive the application much faster than with PET-MRI. Not being said that the work that you've done is invaluable, it's completely valuable and that will help a lot in insight. But the clinical application, I think PET-CT is the way to go. Thank you for this insight. The other thing is that there are many ways to look at plaques, because this morning I traveled from Amsterdam to here, the A2, which you could see it as a metaphor of blood vessels, very tortuous, accidents happen, traffic jams, and then we have all kinds of applications to show me the way, which is the best way. TomTom, the Dutch one, Waze, more Israeli background. You have Google Maps that is now the owner of all Waze, but doesn't matter. All kinds of ways to circumvent the problems that are there. But what you really want is you want to prevent the accidents and you want to prevent the congestion. And that is coming back to the first opponent. We are too late. If an accident has been done, you would like to prevent it, and you would like to see that if I travel this morning, that I can come here in the most quick way, and everybody is here, and there is no accident, and I have no traffic jam. So if you look at things, you should be more clear on what aim you have. And if you look for calcification, for example, I completely agree, you're too late. Because as far as I know, there is no therapy in the world yet that is able to decrease the amount of calcification in coronaries or carotid arteries. So if you would have to choose one of the tracers, and I go for PET-CT, not PET-MRI. So the CT is, let's say, the dual energy, and you have to pick one of the tracers of the PET. And you can go either way as long as you try to give the arguments why you choose for the specific combination that would yield the most for patient care.
So based on the amount of research that has been done on FDG, that's always, for me, a preferred tracer. A marker of inflammation, it shows that macrophages are already present inside the plaque, and therefore it is an important indicator of a plaque at risk. And also its readily availability, its shorter half-life, makes it a very good candidate for vulnerable plaque imaging.
Yeah, and what? Okay, and you would like to combine it with dual energy CT then? So we have a PET dual energy CT.
Yeah, if we are talking about what imaging modality to use, and if PET-MRI is not an option, then yes.
Well, it's not.
then dual energy CT over single energy CT.
Okay, and because the image that you show here shows exactly the problem why FDG is a problem in the heart.
Exactly.
So?
Yeah, but there are ways to circumvent. The patients usually have fast before the exam that they have. They're usually on a more fat-based diet, and therefore you can prevent the uptake in the muscular region, and so there's in the muscle uptake of it.
But I think you use the word can, and it's not always, doesn't work always. So if you have to skip from FDG as the workhorse for the PET-CT now, and you would have the option to go for another one that can circumvent these problems, doesn't have to intervene with patient preparation, because I can tell you it's a nightmare. Which one would you choose?
I would then go for sodium fluoride. Some of the studies that I have seen for sodium fluoride.
Given the time, I got you short, because sodium fluoride, we're too late. We're looking at calcification, and I don't want that.
Then I would then go for gallium dotartate. I think that's the one that's used for hypoxia.
No, but you choose the right, but with the wrong argument. It is. It shows the same. It is shows activated macrophages. So you're looking at the same as FDG. You look at a macrophageal activation, and they are involved in inflammation in the plaque. I look at the rector. There's no. Oh, sorry, at the prorector. There's no more time. Thank you very much for your answers. I'm
really sorry that we have to stop the discussion, but I'd like to continue with the opposition, and the next opponent is Dr. Truijman, a neurologist at Maastricht University Medical Center.
Good morning, candidate. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you with the result, and of course your team as well. I enjoyed reading it a lot, especially since a part of your work is based on the Plaque at Risk study, in which I was myself involved many years ago. So nice to see all the evolving work being done. It's probably not a surprise to you that I would like to discuss the chapter 6 with you. I think page 132, the very last sentence of this chapter is, for me as a neurologist, very reassuring, since simply identifying the presence of IPH seems to be sufficient. I think as a clinician, I think, oh, we're there. However, in the discussion of this chapter, you mentioned that the finding that the quantification of IPH, and then especially the signal intensity, and the volume, unfortunately, does not improve the prognostic value of the risk of recurrent ipsilateral cerebrovascular events. First of all, why is this, according to you, unfortunate?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. The idea behind this study was that we already know IPH is an independent predictor of stroke, but we wanted to see if we could extract further predictive value. So if a certain IPH is of a certain value, does this make patient even more prone than a patient with a lower volume? And same goes with signal intensity ratios. So in that case, we did not get that answer. And that's why it's a bit unfortunate that we were not able to gain more predictive value.
So you were searching for more details on IPH besides the fact it's being present or not?
Exactly.
And what could be a possible explanation for this result, given the fact that it's so promising a feature of the plaque?
If we talk about the volume or signal intensity ratio, these could change over time, or these do change over time. So this could be one of the reasons. If there is leakage of blood inside the plaque, this represents that the mechanical structure of the plaque itself isn't strong enough. And then it is, because of the biomechanical stresses, it is vulnerable to rupture. I imagine now that because the volume, the amount of leakage inside, or the signal intensity, which might change over time, does not really tell you much more about the structure of the plaque. And therefore, it doesn't really affect. But this is, again, an opinion and not researched answer.
Okay, thank you. And since we imagine that the IPH is changing over time, do you think it could be a possible explanation that the timing between the index event and the actual MR being performed on the patient is relatively long? Or do you think it doesn't play a role, since I think it was a median of 51 days you're stating?
Yes. So I believe that most of the changes occur in the first or couple of weeks, and post that it remains quite stable. So our scan time was beyond that change time, but after that it gets stable. So it shouldn't really matter in that sense.
Okay, so we're not really too late with imaging in this specific question.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I was wondering, since we now know that MR, if we see IPH, we're happy. We don't really care about the volume or the intensity. And then in chapter 7, you're discussing the opportunities of dual energy CT, which are definitely better than the single energy CT scanners. But the correlation between the MR for IPH is a little less, right? I was wondering, since in Maastricht we're fortunate to have the ability to image plaque features. We don't do it in clinic yet, but we do have the option. Would you recommend, if we're working in a hospital without having the ability to image vulnerable plaque features with MR, would you suggest to use dual energy instead, or say don't use CT yet?
So if I think the first question is, are we really taking into account the vulnerable plaque features in our decision making? And if the answer to that is yes, then we did see that even though it has a poorer correlation with MR, it still does better than single energy CT. So I think that just makes it, at least provides you more information about the plaque and makes it more suitable choice compared to single energy CT. So if the patient has to get scanned, might as well do it in a dual energy CT scan.
So that's very reassuring that in clinics we can use CT as well. What do we need to bring it really into practice? It's been already discussed a bit, but what do you think will be
So this, I think, has to be a large clinical trial. You have patients that are asymptomatic and symptomatic. You divide these patients, a group of that patient gets the clinical, normal clinical treatment, however it's going on right now, let's say, and the other group, there the vulnerable plaque components are also taken into account in decision making. For example, if a patient has low arterial narrowing and yet they show IPH, then in this group they will go for a procedure to prevent the rupture of the plaque. At the end of a study like this, you will compare the results, the outcomes that were expected for both groups. And if it shows that the mortality or the quality of life improves for the group where their vulnerable plaques were also taken into account, then this could be a valid evidence that could be used to bring the composition into clinical workflows or the use of clinical workflows.
Thank you very much for the answer. I think we also take recurrent events into account, but I'm very happy with your answers, and I'm giving the word back to the Madam Prorector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Truijman. Then we come to the last opponent. It's Dr. Buitinga, Assistant Professor at Maastricht University Medical Center.
Thank you, Madam Prorector. Dear candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you with your nice work. I've read your thesis with great pleasure, and I actually learned quite a number of things about non-invasive plaque imaging. Thank you for that. I would also like to extend my congratulations to the committee and your family. Actually, I would like to discuss Chapter 5. You skipped it in your introduction, and I think nobody touched upon it yet. So I thought let's go to that chapter to finalize the discussion. In this study, you nicely investigated actually the difference between the location of the hemorrhage and the fibrous capsule, whether it's distal or proximal, and what kind of effect that has. And I was actually wondering, you nicely demonstrated that I think at the distal side there was more. Proximal side. Okay, thank you very much. At the proximal side, there was more. But what does this actually mean? Why is that? And does this have any implications for treatments?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. Indeed, we did see larger volumes of intraplaque hemorrhage as well as more thin or ruptured fibrous cap proximal to the narrowest part of the plaque. What this study basically confirmed this in a group of patients which had 50 to 69%. Previously, it had already been confirmed in patients with higher degree of plaque development. What this study wants to build up to is more the mechanical stresses that go through the arterial wall. So other studies have already shown that proximal to the plaque, to the narrowest part of the plaque, the wall stress and wall shear stress are higher. And this can cause more structural deformation, resulting in the formation of or the creation of a thin or ruptured fibrous cap. This could lead to leakage of blood inside into the plaque and cause the intraplaque hemorrhage. But this is something that we hypothesize, and this needs to be actually tested in an actual study.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm actually also very interested in the predictive value of all these measures. And you discussed already a little bit in Chapter 6 that these additional characteristics that you studied there were not of additive value for the prediction model. But now you finalize your PhD, you discuss with other opponents, like some tracers, inflammation, microcalcification, microbeads. So what do you think, what do we need to improve this predictive model?
I think first we need to start implementing the use of these plaque features in our clinical workflows. There are already some features such as the presence of IPH or inflammation that are already have been tested to be independent predictors of stroke. I think over time as we...
But I would actually like to go to building a whole model that you have multiple factors and like if I would give you now a big bag of money, what would you put your money on? Like which combination of different factors would you try to improve your predictive model?
Thank you for the money. Yeah, so for me, of course, the lifestyle of the patient also needs to be taken into account. The arterial narrowing is still extremely important, so that needs to be taken into account. And then based on the thesis itself, I would always prefer IPH and inflammation as the factors that need to be looked into if we want to be able to predict.
And if I look at chapter 5, actually, like there you look at the location, would that be something to be added or are you already too late then?
Yeah. So that's the point. I think with the location, we know there are the stresses and that caused the creation of IPH. So, but by then you already have a plaque that's really prone to rupture and what are you going to do about it? So yeah, it would be good to know, but I don't think it adds an extra value to the prediction model.
Okay. And if you look at earlier markers then, which marker would you pick?
Exactly. I think we talked about a little bit about inflammation. I think sodium fluoride for microcalcifications is also, again, because microcalcifications are involved in the structural integrity, or they reduce the structural integrity. So those are interesting markers for early prediction.
So, and how would you think that would then add up in the clinical workflow? So somebody comes in with some symptoms, or how do you envision that?
Yeah, this is one of the problems. Usually the patient that comes in are showing symptoms, and in that case it might already have these bigger features such as the lipid-rich core or IPH. But if in a case such as this where it is still early and they go for a PET-CT scan even, and inflammation shows up on the scan, then this could be used as an early predictor for how the plaque will behave over time.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer.
Mueez Aizaz, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense, and I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room. Please, all rise.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Southside, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and not. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and not. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Mueez Aizaz, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Coy is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I do.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Mueez Aizaz, the degree of doctor and grant you all the rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with a degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary and the other members of the committee and affixed with the official seal of the university. Yes, and the laudatio will be spoken by Rick Molen.
Esteemed Dr. Aizaz, dear Mueez, it's a great honor to congratulate you on obtaining your PhD. It's a major milestone and the cherry on the cake of your PhD journey. You delivered a very nice thesis, as we've also heard in the compliments from the committee here today. It's become quite a thick book, yet the most impressive is the variety of various imaging modalities that you used. You have a good overview of the various techniques, and not only superficially, you went into depth into the technical details of various aspects. That makes your work quite unique. It is also a testimony to a strength that you've shown throughout. The ability to juggle many balls at the same time. Not only did you work with many modalities, there were also a lot of contacts with other people to maintain. As part of the multi-center consortium IntriCare, with 13 other PhD students, Alex, one of which, chaired by Professor Schurers, in Aachen, Stockholm and London, there were always meetings or courses to attend. And look at the promotion team. Professor René Botnar from King's College London, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Professor Felix Mutagi from both Aachen and Maastricht. And of course, Professor Eline Kooi, who supported you on an almost daily basis. But all this juggling wasn't for nothing. You got not one, but you're getting 2 PhDs. One from Aachen and one from Maastricht. As said, it's been quite a journey. And it wasn't just your PhD which made these years a busy phase of life. After your Master Biomedical Engineering at the RWTH in Aachen, you came to Maastricht. Around the same time, getting married to your lovely wife Nadia. And I remember your first day at UM very well. It was January 8, 2018. Not that we actually met on that day. You had to go to Eindhoven, to the Expect Center in the morning. And I stayed at home while my wife was giving birth to our daughter. So it would actually take 2 more weeks before we finally met each other. And that was right after my birthday. So it gave me the chance to treat you and the other colleagues, not only to fly, but also to beschouwd with muisjes. And make you accustomed to these Dutch customs straight away. You already had the first of many calls with René and Claudia at KCL at that time to make plans for the MOCO and the Boost projects. And they stayed closely involved throughout your PhD. Of course, I should also mention Camilla and Alina, who helped you with processing of so many data sets. In those early days, you were very ambitious. In fact, I think we were maybe a bit too ambitious. I recently looked up the personal development plan that we drafted at the time. Yeah, it mentioned dual energy CT, MOCO, and BOOST projects, and all three were going to be wrapped up and published in the first year. And if that wasn't enough, you were also going to attend some Dutch courses at the same time. Now, we know you can juggle a lot at the same time, but each of these projects proved a lot more challenging than we could foresee at the start. At the end of that first year, you visited King's College in London. From November to January, you were there, and there were no publications yet, but you did manage to get your first abstract accepted at both the ISMRM and ISMRM Benelux, on a fourth project, by the way. You even got selected for an oral presentation at the ISMRM Benelux, which is quite an honor for a first-year PhD, and reason enough to travel back and forth from London to Leiden to deliver your talk. The ISMRM was in Montreal that year, and Eline told me that the two of you had quite a memorable day there when you rented a car to go out for a mountain hike, and were surprised and a bit challenged by the amount of snow that's still there in May. There are some other colleagues that I want to mention. Your roommates, Julian and Pandi, who helped you get settled here, and of course Jochem, with whom you were calling patients for recruitment on an almost weekly basis. You also supervised a number of bachelor students, and quite successful and inspiring from the fact that at least one of them is now pursuing his own PhD, Jules, he's in the room here, also in vascular imaging. Your own journey had its challenges. First came COVID, challenging for all of us, but even more so if you're far away from family and it stopped you from visiting Pakistan. But there were good things too. In 2021, your beautiful daughter Dina was born. Now you were a young father. And a year later, when your contract had ended, you picked up a new job at Philips in Best, and you had to move a couple of times. First to Heerlen, then to Best, then within Best again. But at the same time, you persevered in your PhD. In fact, most of your publications are from this period. And you managed to wrap up your thesis in the spare 3 hours that you seemingly still had left. This was a very good final sprint in the great development that you've shown throughout the years. And I truly admire the persevering spirit. Mueez, I congratulate you again. Now is the time to celebrate and enjoy this great achievement. I wish you well.
Dear Dr. Mueez Aizaz, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I would like to congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. I also want to congratulate your family, present here, but hopefully also watching the live stream online and seeing how you have done the defense of your thesis today. I'd like to congratulate your colleagues, friends who have one way or the other supported you during this PhD trajectory, which I know from experience often isn't as smooth as you would like it to be. But it has come to an end, and I hope that you are happy with the way you have been able to defend your thesis. I can tell you that the committee was very happy with the way you defended the work, which was very broad, different topics, and I think it's also an important topic that you tackled, trying to develop ways to non-invasively detect vulnerable plaques, and in that way try to improve research, but also patient care, hopefully in the end. I'd like to congratulate your supervisors with this nice PhD defense. I'd like to thank the members of the committee present here, and online, especially our guests from outside of Maastricht, Professor Nicola, Professor Schultz, Dr. Verberne. Thank you very much for your time coming here, for Dr. Verberne and being online. Your investment in this PhD ceremony is very much appreciated by Maastricht University. Yeah, I think we are now coming to the closure of this academic ceremony, and I hope you have a very enjoyable day, and I wish you a lot of success in your future career.
Thank you so much.
And with this, I close this academic ceremony.